Welcome to, as I just said, our first virtual event of a new academic year. I'm Jennifer Northam. I'm class of 1991, and I've been a member of the alumni team for 10 years. Time flies, but trust me, I was having fun. Just a few notes before we begin. This event is being recorded, so we can share it with those who could not attend today. You are welcome to turn on your camera so our speakers can see you, but only if you wish to do so. When it's time for questions, you can put those in the chat, which is that bar of options at the bottom of your screen, or you can use the raise your hand function and turn on your microphone to ask your question when I call on you. So beginning this fall, Whitman students will have a new area of study, a concentration in human-centered design, working to understand the deeper meaning of objects, spaces, systems, and beyond, and how to evaluate people's interactions with the designed world. In the words of one of our featured faculty, human-centered design threads together multiple disciplines at Whitman in order to wrestle with challenging puzzles in today's society, from climate change to accessibility and inclusivity in our digital and physical worlds. It's my sincere pleasure to introduce 5 distinguished faculty members who have worked together to create this opportunity and will advise students and teach courses in the new concentration. Now, if we were together in person, I would ask you to join me in applauding each faculty member as they arrived on stage. But in this virtual setting, let's use an alumni office favorite, the jazz hand. I'd like to welcome Janet Davis, Associate Professor and Microsoft Chair of Computer Science, William Bears, Associate Professor of Computer Science, Sharon Alker, the Mary A. Denny Professor of English and General Studies, Michelle Janning, the Raymond and Elise DeBerg Chair of Social Sciences and Professor of Sociology, and our MC for this event, Justin Lincoln, Associate Professor of Art. Justin, I turn things to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you everyone for coming to this virtual event. I'm really excited to share the research that we as faculty have done in connection with human-centered design at Whitman. For me, HCD has generated a kind of energy that feels like a snowball that just keeps rolling and getting bigger and bigger. And I've had a blast working with everyone here. I think actually if we could go to the next slide, we have an outline for what we're going to be presenting today. We're going to start before the official presentations with just a few questions. And these questions are there for you to start thinking in certain lenses. In a way, I think we want you to help us out, even as we hope to help you out. After those reflections, we are going to hear from Michelle Janning, then Sharon, then William. Janet and I will present about a class workshop that involved everyone here. And then we're going to switch to breakout rooms for about 5 to 10 minutes. And during those 5 to 10 minutes, I'd like you to kind of introduce yourselves to each other and maybe articulate some questions even before we come back and talk in a larger group. And the final section is going to be that larger group where we will try to answer any questions that you may have. So if we could go to the next slide. The first question we have for you, and if you have something to write with, that would be great. You can also always use like the whiteboard in your Zoom to do this. But one thing I'd like you to think about first is, how does design manifest in your life? And you might be wondering, like, what is design? And that could be a question that we could have a conversation for like 2 or 3 hours about. But I'm just going to say for brevity's sake, let's say that design is the knowledge that anything that is made had to be imagined. Okay. So where does the imagination and making come in your life? Then the next question we have for you is, I want you to think specifically in kind of 2 lines. One is about design school and one is about liberal arts. Now, you may only be an expert on the liberal arts side, and that's okay. But I want you to think about assumptions that you make about what is a liberal arts school, what is design school. And the thing about assumptions is that assumptions are, in a way, they can be good and bad, or good or bad. Don't get too hung up on the assumptions. They're just kind of building blocks that can help us in our discussion. Next question. All right, this is the question that, you know, is perhaps implicit in most presentations of this type. And that is, what is the question you hope we will answer? So if you could, just for a minute or two, write down a question. Put a question in your head before we get started. And then if we don't get to them in our smaller presentations, we'll certainly reach to that in our Q&A. All right, so first up, we're going to hear from Michelle Janning.
Thanks, Justin. It feels like a class, doesn't it? This is good. I think in some ways we've designed this session to feel a little bit like you're walking into a classroom at Whitman, and before you know it, you're asked to write something down and think for yourself and employ those critical thinking skills. So we always love that practice. And it's really nice also to see some familiar names and faces. I know there are a lot of Whitman members, community members here, but there are also some people here who those of us working on this have met along the way in our kind of expansion of the design professional network. So welcome to everybody, whether you're a Whitman community member or not. I'm the first of 3 people who are going to just share a story about a class, and mine weaves together 3 things I love: sociology, design, and community-based learning attached to childhood issues in Walla Walla. And the class I'm going to talk about, and I have 3 slides that are mostly pictures. This first slide just shows, I think, some images of what the class Designing Contemporary Childhoods entailed. It entailed field trips to Walla Walla Center for Children and Families, you can see in the top central part there. It entailed community partnerships with the Walla Walla Valley Disability Network. And in the first green circle in the middle is my friend Cindy Knight, who is or was at the time the director of the Walla Walla Valley Disability Network. Thanks to some wonderful internal funding and community engaged learning, we were able to compensate Cindy for collaborative work with our students and with her own staff members to help think about ways that our class of Whitman students could pitch design ideas to the Walla Walla Valley Disability Network to help them improve, in particular, outreach to families with children that were young. The Disability Network had done a really good job. They'd had identified of reaching kids with or adults with children with disabilities as adults and as really little kids, but the K-12 process, there was a little bit of a gap. So working with Cindy, we were able to identify some points that we thought could be starting points for students to work on. Enter the bottom right corner and you see the other green circle, Whitman alumna Katie Crumick, who's been really, really integral in helping us faculty design the HCD program, came into our class and did a workshop to help teach students design thinking. What are the tools that the design world can help us use to think about ways to address and maybe narrow down the scope of the questions that the Disability Network was trying to have us help with. And so the other pictures here are our collaborations among student teams, design thinking practice exercises, and of course, towards the end of the semester, being outside on Ankeny Field, talking with Cindy about, hey, are our ideas, the prototypes we came up with, a good idea? If you go to the next slide, the things that are pictured here are basically an example of one of the 4 student teams. They started with a great how might we question. After talking with stakeholders, Cindy's staff, parents, family members, going to events that the Disability Network put in, talking to each other about how disability matters even at Whitman College among our students. This group of Gabe, Lucy, Lenny, Chris, and Maggie came up with the question, how might we enhance forms of communication, information sharing, and outreach to families in Walla Walla? They redesigned the brochure that with another iteration is going to end up in doctors' offices in Walla Walla, where parents who have young children with new diagnoses of autism or other intellectual and developmental disabilities or learning issues are faced with, what do I do now? Well, handing them something with a QR code where they can go to it later is a really powerful gesture and act in a medical office. And this student team figured that out by talking to parents and medical providers and the staff itself. So they redesigned a brochure that Cindy and her team were very excited to see. And if you go to the next slide, you will see then what it looked like to have this team share their ideas with members of the Walla Walla Valley Disability Network, which included staff members as well as their board. And then the picture of the class is also there along with board members from the Disability Network. So here students had a chance to learn about what is childhood as it's constructed sociologically. What is the Walla Walla context? How does that matter? Who are the professionals who we can also learn from besides in a classroom? How might design thinking be useful and maybe limited in some ways for working with an organization who was trying to figure out not just how to solve things, but maybe even how to define what they're trying to solve in the first place. So this was a special topics class. It was a 2-credit class. We met once a week. I'm grateful to Whitman for all of the funding that we were able to do to compensate our partners. And I can tell you right now, the students loved it. They had a great time and they were able to do this interdisciplinary work while also connecting to the Walla Walla community. So that's my story. And I would like to invite the next person to tell their story. I think that's Sharon.
Thank you, Michelle. I would be delighted to tell my story. My story is also of another special topics course, a 4-credit course called Wicked Problems. And it was about what the relationship is between literature and wicked problems. So I'm going to be teaching the first year course in the year after next. So last year, I thought to myself, I need to, I'd been to Stanford D School and I wanted to up my ability to teach design techniques. And so I thought that I could do that, but at the same time, do something else, which is to correct a perception problem that people have about studying English and the humanities. So if you could move on to the next slide, you'll see the size of the words don't mean anything here, but this is my own personal little study of what my particular advisees in English went on to do after they graduated from here for about a 5-year period. And as you can see, they found jobs in many different fields. In other words, there's no problem getting jobs with English degrees. But there is a lot of misinformation out there that tells you you can't get a job with an English degree, and that misinformation affects employers, it affects parents, and it affects students. So I thought perhaps I could both practice using these design techniques for the design program in the future, but I could also help with this perception problem. So if you could move to the next slide. Basically, what I was doing was bringing together things that didn't seem to fit that well together, but in fact, they did fit very well together. Students initially that came in the class, there was a wide variety of students from like first-year students all the way up to senior science majors and literature majors. Initially came in not really knowing what to expect. We were in a computer lab where we mostly folded down the computers and worked on the tables to do design projects. And by the end, I think students were really convinced that these two things did fit together, literature and design thinking. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what we did in the course. I assigned them a variety of novels that dealt with wicked problems. And by wicked problems, I mean this is a sort of simplistic definition, but I mean kind of multi-dimensional dynamic problems that can't easily be fixed, that continually mutate. And when you try to solve them, other problems evolve. So what novels deal with that? Well, many novels. So I started with Dracula, which basically deals with a novel of an invasion of vampires, but is also dealing with with the wicked problem of colonization. It's written during the Victorian times. But then the other novels were mostly fairly recent. Susanna Clarke's Piranesi deals with knowledge production and knowledge being taken away from certain individuals who are marginalized, and the way that they try to find knowledge and make sure that it's used in good ways instead of misused. Patricia Lockwood's novel, No One Is Talking About This, was my class's favorite novel. It is about social media. And how social media creates context collapse. So in your life, you can't tell the difference between really important things that need a lot of deep thought and trivialities. So lots of very relevant information there for the students. Zadie Smith's White Teeth deals with problems of racism and gender inequity, as well as body image problems as well. Louisa Hall's Speak deals with artificial intelligence and robots and the deep human desire for contact, but the problems that can occur when that contact is with artificial intelligence instead of with other people. And then Nnedi Okorafor's Lagoon is actually it's supposed to be about an invasion from space in Nigeria, but really what it's about is Nigerian people trying to deal with the after effects of colonization and the corruption that has been created in their community because of colonization. So these are really big, very wicked problems. And the students were going to be using design thinking to try to think about ways to intervene, not to solve wicked problems, not easy to solve, but ways to intervene in some of these problems. So if we could move to the next slide. Basically, the way I taught this class is it was taught Monday, Wednesday, Friday. On Mondays and Wednesday, we did normal English class things. We did a lot of close reading together. We did in-depth engagement with the texts we were studying. We wanted to understand the worlds that these texts were creating, because my theory of teaching literature is that every time you fall into a book, you're falling into another world, and you need to learn the rules of that world, and you need to learn how people navigate that world, and you need to learn how the problems in that world work and why certain solutions work and don't work. So this is why English students are so adaptable and empathetic, because they're so used to falling into world after world after world and learning to interpret it. So that's what we did Mondays and Wednesdays. We created flexibility, adaptability, and empathy through regular English studies. Friday, the next slide, was different. Friday was labs. I had never taught English labs before, but it was so fun. Basically, what we did is we used a lot of design thinking techniques, and design thinking is adjacent to and sort of intersects with human-centered design. So we learned some of their key concepts: empathy, defining a problem, ideating, creating solutions or interventions, prototyping possible interventions, and then testing them and getting critique. My students did journey maps. So what they did is they would map out the journey of individuals in particular texts. They learned how to organize data, which for a literature person is mainly quotes from texts, but we also practiced with pictures as well. We organized pictures. What I was trying to show them was that basically you can bring together two language constituencies. One of them is the literary world language, and the other is business language, which involves design thinking, and they actually intersect really kind of neatly. We also taught them, we did prototypes. Students, for example, created prototypes of things to ward off vampires. And then they would talk about interventions that they could do to make their prototype better. They also collaboration was something they did from the beginning. The collaboration is something that you need to know to do in the workplace. We spent a lot of time talking about collaboration, from brainstorming with post-it notes to prototyping, and we talked about how to effectively and inclusively collaborate. We also visualized. Visualization is part of what I was taught at design school that was called shape shifting. In other words, think of a thing that you're studying, but in a different shape. So I would have them draw pictures. I'll show you images in a moment they did of Piranesi. Draw pictures of a scene from a book, and then study that scene that they drew to see if they learned anything new on top of what they had learned from just reading the text. And then we did a lot of self-reflection in journals, which is part of design thinking as well, to actually not only think about what you're doing, but also to think about thinking about what you're doing. We can go to the next slide and I can show you just a couple of examples. The example on the far left is just they had to all give pictures of places they felt most happy. And then they had to organize data. So in groups, they had to try to, using tape, try to organize into categories and then come to some conclusions about Whitman students and enjoyment. The second image is just somebody starting to draw Piranesi's journey through this novel so that they could understand more clearly how the character was progressing. The third one is a kind of crazy idea, peeping grandma. This is an idea that a community had for, no one is talking about this, to have a kind of grandma figure that would always be watching over you while if you're a young person online, so that you would always be doing things that would be suitable for your grandma to see, so that you wouldn't get caught up in bad stuff. We had problems with the word peeping, but you can ask about that in the question session. And then the third picture is just them working with Post-it notes to brainstorm together and ideate together. So you can see that it was very much, on Fridays, we were standing up a lot, we were leaning over desks a lot, we were working with objects and things rather than just sitting. And the next slide is just, I promised I would show you some of the images. So this is some of our students are really amazing artists. These are some of the images from scenes from Piranesi. They had to choose a page number, tell me the page number, draw a scene, and then write a paragraph that explained what they learned from drawing the scene that hadn't been evident to them in reading the text. And so these are some of the most amazing ones that I got from my students. So not what you would expect students to be doing in an English class, but they really had fun. And then the final one I have is just a student response. I got very positive student responses. I got 6 English majors out of that class. But this particular journal response was from a science student who said, I learned a lot from this class. I never realized how applicable business and literature could be for science and vice versa. So this is a student learning to think in an interdisciplinary way. And he said this class has not only helped him rediscover literature, but helped him try to figure out how to engage with major social problems. So though it wasn't perfect, I learned a lot from this class and will use some of the things I learned going forward when I teach the human-centered design class. So now I will hand over to William.
Okay, it is a pleasure to speak with everyone today. So the thing that really gets me excited is this idea of storytelling being a universal and timeless form of design. In my own teaching and research, I use computer programming and digital techniques to help students tell stories of their ideas that can come from anywhere in the liberal arts. Storytelling in particular is an essential part of Indigenous cultures. I have an upcoming sabbatical in the works, and after President Bolton's installation ceremony, I got a chance to speak with Lindsay Watchman, who is the general chairperson of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And Lindsay's face just totally lit up when I introduced this idea of going in collaborating with the Confederated Tribes and teaching their young people how to use digital design and storytelling techniques to tell the story of the salmon, which is very important to their culture. What I'm going to share today are results of a 4-day STEM summer camp to teach digital storytelling and programming to the youth of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And this work was done with several 2 Whitman students and high school student, and with thanks to Kendall Rosario and her colleagues at the CTIR. And the funding sources noted. Next slide, please. Okay, so what you're seeing here is an example of application of design, iterative design in particular, where you start with a rough idea sketched out in a storyboard form. You sort of set the stage of your story, where you're going. In this case, we're looking at work from kindergarten and first grade students who were working to tell the story of how a salmon creates its nest. And the salmon lays the eggs, swishes its tail to dig a hole for the eggs, covers them up with rocks, and then the salmon hatch. And then along the way, the salmon face many dangers, including bears drawn below. And we also used more iterative design of this idea of starting with a rough sketch. In this bottom right prompt, students were given a design prompt to imagine a guide, an animal guide that would help tell the story of the salmon. And so in this picture bottom left, the student imagines the guide being the coyote. The student drew a picture of the coyote guide and then used colored modeling clay to shape that guide animal. Next slide, please. Okay, and on this slide, you're looking at work from the 4th and 5th grade group that learned the basics of Scratch block programming. And all of the students in the group, we had about 20 in each of these 3 sessions organized by age group. All of the students in this 4th to 5th grade group were able to successfully create an interactive game using the Scratch block programming language. And to help connect together the design work that the kindergarten through third graders did, my student helpers scanned and digitally shared in their online class forum scanned artwork of the salmon. You can see the very ferocious spawning salmon in red. And then to the right of that is an example of an insect that the salmon might eat to grow as it's after it's hatched and it's getting ready to store up food to make its long journey. And the bottom image shows the interactive Scratch game projected onto the floor. And so for the last day of this camp, we set up a projector that was casting the image of the game onto the floor so the kids could walk over that image of the animated game, and another child moved the mouse, and then the salmon would follow the mouse to catch and eat the bugs. And every time the salmon caught one of the bugs, it grew a little bit larger. And so this is just the beginning of this one-year sabbatical project, and I'll be looking forward to working with community partners and the Confederated Tribes to engage more young people to tell more parts of the salmon story. And if you're curious about what other kind of things are possible with immersive storytelling, I have a really neat webpage that you can look up as well. Okay, thank you, and look forward to chatting during breakouts.
Hey there, Janet.
Hey, Justin.
Okay, so we're going to be doing this together. And I guess as an intro, the HCD workshop that we did, Designing HCD 101, is in connection with the first HCD 101 class that will be taught in the spring of this academic year. We wanted to get a bit of a jump on the syllabus. We wanted to build up an introductory curriculum, and we approached it like a design project. And I was really thrilled to work with people that I've been working with for years now, to start making what was once a dream into what will be a reality. Janet?
Thanks, Justin. If we've got a minute, I actually just want to provide a little bit of context about where this class fits into the concentration before we jump into this workshop. So as Justin said, we'll be offering HCD 101 for the first time in spring 2024. Justin and I will be co-teaching it. I've wanted to co-teach with Justin since I got first got to Whitman. So I'm super jazzed to do that. And this course will have a rotating cast of faculty. So Michelle and Sharon are also looking forward to teaching it in the 24-25 academic year, and William and others will teach it as well in the fullness of time. And so we wanted to co-design this course together. HCD 101 is part of the frame of the human-centered design concentration at Whitman. Students will begin with HCD 101, ideally in their first or second year. They will go off and take courses across the liberal arts, focusing on understanding people, understanding artifacts, methods for observing people and evaluating artifacts, as well as actually making new artifacts. Somewhere during those middle years, students will also complete a collaborative practical experience. So this is a design project out in the community that could be part of an internship, a volunteer project, a research project, or our forthcoming summer design lab. And then finally, students will conclude with HCD 497 by preparing a design portfolio and helping them be ready to showcase their design skills and experiences. What we're going to do during this segment is just share some vignettes about our HCD 101 design workshop. You'll see some things that might be familiar from the previous talks. Let's see, next slide. Aha. Okay, so I think I've got this one and you've got the next one, Justin, and I've got the last one. Awesome. So Sharon earlier mentioned having students draw journey maps for characters in the novels they were reading. We started our workshop with a journey map. Each of us drew our own individual journey maps, showing our engagement with human-centered design over time. And particularly the horizontal dimension of the journey map is time. If you look really close, you can see we started in winter 2021 and it's leading up to today. The vertical dimension of the journey map is emotion, so high points and low points. And so we have some high points where we got really excited about collaborations and new learning experiences. We also had some low points where we went through some political difficulties and just had some personally difficult experiences. But putting this all together really helped us to understand where we have been and where we are going in the design of the HCD concentration. It was good for noticing our own feelings about the process, as well as understanding each other's. And Justin, this is you.
All right. So another exercise that we did, and it was the first time I've ever led this activity, is something called a mashup. And in this mashup, maybe to give you an illustration of the principle of mashup, is you take two distinct ideas, and by combining them, you come up with this new innovative thing. And years ago, a friend of mine told me that they had a dream where they had to describe my class to someone who'd never taken it. And this friend described it as Montessori class with big words. And I could really live with that combination. I'm all for hands-on, but I also like theory. But I really was curious, what did we want our workshop to be? And what did we want HCD 101 to be? And you see a few answers here. And for me, one of the great points of working with the people that are here right now and all of the other people that we've been working with for the last few years is how energizing it has been. And I wanted that workshop to be energizing. I wanted it to be a battery charge. And to be honest, I'm hoping that HCD 101 is going to be that kind of battery charge for our students. It's really important to get excited, especially if you're doing a big project. And I guess one of the other reasons that we wanted to share these activities is especially as has to do with brainstorming. Maybe the next time that you need to do a quick elevator pitch for some sort of idea, I would say that doing a mashup, combining two things that hadn't been combined before to describe what you're doing, can be really useful. Janet?
Thank you. In fact, the next thing that we did after this, which I'm not going to show you, is we thought of how might we questions for our class. And some of these mashups were really helpful for generating those kind of how might we questions. What were we trying to do in the design of the class? But we promised 3 kind of short vignettes. So here's the third one. As we were starting to organize this workshop, Justin proposed that we use this book, The Field Guide to Human-Centered Design, as a textbook to the class. So before our workshop, I sat down, I skimmed the book, and I was kind of skeptical. I looked at it and said, this is not the kind of textbook I'm used to. This doesn't really provide a framework for teaching the class. It seems like it provides an overview of the field, kind of something that you can skim in an hour or two, and then you've got kind of an overview and you can dig in deeper on individual things as you find them useful. So maybe this is useful, maybe it's not, I don't know. So during the workshop, we took up this question: should we use the Field Guide to Human-Centered Design as a textbook? We took this up as a question. And where we came to during our discussion was to look at the textbook as an artifact. So it's not just a tool for learning, it's also an artifact that we can study as part of the class. Some ideas related to that. A textbook gives legitimacy and unity to the class, but it can also be a point of critique. It gives an overview, some examples, an accompanying website. It's a quick reference guide after HCD 101. And so this kind of started me thinking about, well, how can this book be helpful to students? And then where I really became convinced was when we started talking about how would we actually use this book through the class. That it would not only be pre-reading for class activities, but it would also be an opportunity for reflection, a source for additional methods that we might not cover for the class. And I want to come back to the textbook as a point for critique. We hope to engage we hope to engage students in some of that critique as well. And I just gave you a sneak preview of the next slide. So we're really excited to teach this class next spring. We still have a lot of work to do to design our syllabus, but this workshop gave us a very good start, and I'm very grateful to Michelle, Sharon, and William for joining us for that workshop. And then on to the next slide. I'll turn it back to Justin as our MC.
Okay, so we are going to be breaking out into breakout rooms momentarily. And I guess one of the things that we hope that we can do with this is we can invite you to join us in the process of building the program. If you think back to these questions that I asked at the beginning, like what are your assumptions about the liberal arts? What are your assumptions about design school? Where does design fit in your life? All of these can help us think about how we can help students that we're going to be working with based on people that we work with now or alumni from the school who have experience in the field. So when we break out into breakout rooms, all that we'd ask is if you could introduce yourselves to the other people in the small group. I think that initially the 5 of us presenters are going to be in some rooms too, we may make exits a little bit early to prepare for the larger Q&A. But besides introducing yourself, if you could maybe talk to each other a little bit about questions that you may have about the program and about how design fits in your life. What are some of the possibilities that you see based on what we've just shared with you? So, Jennifer, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, I'm about to invite you to a breakout room. We're assigned randomly, and I'll stop recording while the breakout rooms are happening and start again when we're all together for the Q&A. And we'll give you a minute's warning when we're about to come back to full group. All right, here we go.
Hello? I noticed a couple of former students, and I wanted to say hi. Really glad to see you here.
Hi, Zoe. It's great to see you.
Hi, Janet. I was just talking about HCI.
Also, I think I saw Jackie.
Yes, hi. I was just talking about how your class was one of the main design classes that I took when I was at Whitman.
Great, thank you.
I was in an awesome group that has lots of great questions, so I would encourage them to put them in the chat or to put up their hands when the time comes.
I just want to give a shout out of gratitude to alumni who've already been helping us talk through this program and feeding our ideas and curricular ideas and volunteering to help. And those of you who are here today, thanks for even more ideas. And please reach out to us after today if you would like to continue to be involved. That's my little pitch. I'll stop.
So how do we want to gather questions now?
I'm happy to call on people as hands are raised. I'll ask people who are not speaking at the moment to put themselves back on mute, please. I see Anne Larrabee is putting some things in the chat. Here, let's get started. How many courses will be in the program?
Well, I can think of two different ways to answer that question. One is how many courses will students be required to take? And the other is how many courses will be included. So students will be required to take 6 courses, plus that curricular practical experience, which might be a co-curricular activity. So HCD 101, HCD 497 are our frames. And then in between 4 courses in these different areas. And we have long lists of courses that count towards these 4 different areas, understanding people, understanding artifacts, design and make, and observe and evaluate. We have long lists of courses that count towards those areas. And one of our really difficult tasks over the next 5 to 10 years might actually be narrowing those lists of courses down to be more focused. Does that answer your question?
I think that it might answer the first part of the question. There's a second part that I'd be very excited to answer, and that is how will students explain what they've done in the program to people after Whitman? And the reason I'm so excited about this is that the way we've set up our curriculum, before graduating, students will be taking a capstone course. And the capstone course will likely be co-taught with a professional in the field, as well as the Whitman faculty. And one of the major aims of the capstone is to build a portfolio and a narrative. And I think that, like, as it stands right now, we have so many options in terms of paths that students can take to fulfill their requirements for this concentration. And each choice that they make is going to be a very different experience from what the person next to them in the class will have had. And so they're going to have to kind of connect the dots. They're going to need to articulate for themselves, what did I learn in this concentration? And this is something that we're going to be paying very close attention to as we assess the program over the next few years. Is it legible to students what they've learned and what HCD means to them? If they can explain it at the end of this class, I think it's going to help when it comes to future employers or parents or just about anyone who asks.
Just as a point of information, I put a link in the chat that is our entire catalog copy of the requirements of the concentration that should be accessible to everybody. If you click on the link that is there.
Thanks, Michelle. Someone brought a question forward from their group. Can we learn more about how internships would be incorporated into the program?
I can take a stab at that. I think the answer is we're still trying to figure that out a little bit, but I do think that there are ways in which that's been explicitly part of our conversation. We defined the collaborative practice experience quite broadly because we know that students on their pathways through Whitman really go through a variety of these experiences anyway. They do internships, let's say, in a bank, or they do an internship in a nonprofit or in an arts organization or in an environmental group. What we want to do is to either have them take that internship and either, maybe with the help of the CCEC and our wonderful colleagues there, define a project that we could sort of put under the umbrella of human-centered design or frame it that way. Or if there are places where, say, UX research or human-centered design or interactive design or iterative design or any other of the kind of words associated with this are an explicit thing, we want to collect those and make sure that those are also in our repertoire for students to choose from. They can be in Walla Walla, they can be external, maybe they would even be on Whitman's campus. Certainly HCD could be useful even for some of the offices that we have in our own institutional settings. So it's quite broadly defined right now. And if people have ideas, I would say we're open to talking more about that. But colleagues, are there other things that you would clarify or say about internships that you've thought of?
I would just say, I think we've gathered a whole bunch of connections already in the community. And so if you have more connections for us, we would add them to our list because we're collecting interesting parties. And we're also we have a good relationship with the Student Engagement Center, which also works finding internships as well. So we're starting off fairly strong with a decent idea of places that we can connect students to. But we're always looking for more.
Great. Bridget put a question in the chat. What do you hope students will do with what they learn through the program in their future endeavors and careers? Skills, approaches, benefits, advantages to HCD thinking?
Maybe I'll start with one kind of answer and let my colleagues make other kinds of answers. So my first answer to that question is, as many of you know, we already have Whitman alumni who are going into fields and professions related to human-centered design. And so we wanted to take that trend and better support students who have an interest in design so that they're not needing to kind of reinvent the wheel, each one of them, as they figure out a path through Whitman that supports their interests. So I guess one answer is we want them to leave with whatever design skills they and mindsets they hope to take forward into their future professional life. So that's one kind of answer, and I'll see if my colleagues have other answers.
I think for humanities majors, sometimes they haven't known how to speak about what they do and why it's relevant to being a lawyer, being a business person, being a marketing executive. So they just haven't had the correct language to do that. But as I said earlier, my students go into a wide variety of careers. So basically what I want them to do is to continue to go in these careers, perhaps find new career directions now that they have more knowledge of the kind of language that is used in a wide variety of businesses, but have a greater ability to talk about it in a language that the interviewers on the employer side will understand. So I think they will continue to go on to careers in education or law or airline pilots or doctors as they have in the past, but they will be able to break through to employers better because they can show that they can actually have practical applications of some of their skills.
Wonderful. Heather has two questions in a comment here in the chat. She's curious about the foundations regarding level setting around language use, bias, stigma, ableism, worldview. That list could be very long. Can you talk to that?
Sure.
I just want to say real quick, I did put one of our learning goals in the chat that probably comes close to beginning that conversation, Justin. So continue to go ahead, and I just let you know I added that.
Sure. Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm really glad that this question came up. Two people in my group also asked questions about inclusion and inclusivity. And I think that, you know, this is something that is so in the wheelhouse of the liberal arts that I think that we might be better fit than many schools, say, with heavy focus on engineering, for example, that this is going to be something that we really care about. We really care about the humans at the center of human-centered design. And we want to move past inclusion and universal design and these sorts of concepts as only, we don't want it to just be rhetoric or or just paid lip service. It seems, you know, from my experience learning about these things over the last few years, this is something that needs to be built in as we go. And that has been something that I saw even in the workshop that we did just a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure my colleagues have much more to say about this.
Do they, or should we go on to the next question?
I think William wants to say something.
Yeah, I was going to
thought
invite
about
William
this
too.
during our workshop.
Great.
Yeah, so as I've been doing research for my sabbatical project and spending time with the community members of the Confederated Tribes of the Matilla Indian Reservation, they have a very totally different worldview. I mean, so much more sense of community and sharing and common purpose. Their approach to big problems like the environment and climate change are taking a more, just view that is much more, about stewardship and thinking about how my design choices might impact animals, salmon, and the land, the environment, and passing that on. It's a whole different value set, and I really do believe that the liberal arts college is actually a stronger position than the more engineering and specialized design programs, because we have these programs of study already. We have colleagues in art history, we have colleagues in sociology and history who have been working very closely with the Confederated Tribes, and we have this knowledge source that we can bring in. And I'm hoping to bring in more design ideas from indigenous design. And so these methods that we use in design, we're planning and I'm hoping to have broader view of design methods beyond the usual Western ideas and values of the design. I think that's going to be a strength going forward.
Thank you, William.
Right, Justin, I saw you liked Marta's question, but let's raise that forward. Will there be skill support, such as learning Photoshop, a workshop to learn how to prototype with basic materials, for example?
Sure. Now, one thing that we've learned from our own experience is how important it can be to prototype very hands-on. And while I can see certain tools, whether it's Photoshop or say Figma, can be really useful for these sorts of things, I think that a lot of times when we're just prototyping to think, having our hands in tangible materials is something that we're thinking a lot about, and we're really excited to go shopping for prototyping materials in our 101 course. Students will cover a lot of technology, but a lot of it's also going to be looking at the greater world around us as well.
Thanks, Justin.
Sure.
Let's see, Shilpa had a great question. I'm curious about how you were thinking about addressing all of the challenges and opportunities related to AI in a human-centered design in the context of this program.
Janet?
I am still wrapping my head around human-centered design. I've spent the last year plus wrapping my head around AI in the context of computer science. I don't know what AI means for design. That's where I am.
Can I add something?
You know, Janet and I at the Stanford D School last month, we were fortunate enough to get to go. And one of the big themes was AI and this exact question. Of course, in education, we're thinking about ChatGPT and, you know, plagiarism, but it's way beyond that. And probably the coolest assignment that I have to find a way to use in some class I teach at some point is basically design a newspaper heading. Was it, Janet, like 20 years from now?
About that was a really fun exercise, but that was beyond AI, wasn't it?
It was beyond AI, but it was a design project of what does it mean? And it made us think about what, you know, frankly, moral and ethical and other considerations our small groups were having as we thought about, first of all, who are the stakeholders? Are robot stakeholders? I mean, we went everywhere. So I think it's safe to say we're thinking about this the same as everybody else. And I am so excited to work with students on this, frankly, as a design question in classes as we teach them.
Yeah,
so Michelle, my group talked about climate change. I'm curious, were you in one of the groups about AI? And if so, do you remember the headline you came up with or one of the other groups' headlines?
Yes, our headline was that for the first time, the US elected its first AI representative in the House of Representatives. As a member of a representative government. So do what you want with that.
Can I just add, I think the best advice I've heard and I sometimes give is don't panic. So I just think we're just very early in this. We're starting to, regardless of whether we're teaching design classes or just ordinary regular classes, professors are starting to experiment with this, and many of us have an AI policy, and often, not always, but often our policy will say, sometimes you can use ChatGPT, but we'll tell you why and we'll tell you under what conditions. Or we might have an assignment that involves ChatGPT, and usually that assignment will show you how crappy it is at doing the things that you need to do for class. So we're already thinking of ways to weave it into all our classes. So I think it will be just a natural thing to weave it into design classes.
Yeah, I think that I mean, it's funny how we have so much energy to answer this question, but if I could put my 2 cents in, I think that AI right now is a very open question, and the open nature of the question is exciting. I think that it's an opportunity for us to think about what we as humans can do that can't be replicated, and to really examine, for example, the way that current programs like, say, ChatGPT, it hallucinates a whole lot. And it's funny, I've started feeling a little empathetic for these algorithms, because, you know, it gets things wrong just like us. And we have to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah, I'd like to just briefly add, I came back just a couple of days ago from the SIGGRAPH, the big computer graphics conference, and AI was pretty much everywhere. And one of the things that was apparent is that you have to be a good thinker and writer to work with these generative systems, because many of them now just work with a natural language prompt where you write what you want the AI to generate. And so there's going to be a new form of thinking about how to write and communicate with these AI systems as an example of an opportunity where the traditional craft of writing is going to remain very important.
Fascinating. We do have a question asking if alumni can come back and take the program. I'd love to be a student again. It's very exciting. All right.
When I was, before I came to Whitman 8 years ago, I worked at Grinnell College. And one of the real highlights of my time at Grinnell College was giving a lecture about cell phones and human values in Grinnell's Alumni College. So maybe that might be somewhere in our future.
Excellent. Please know that I have taken note of this, Janet. Great. Going back to Heather, she did have one other section to her question that I thought would be interesting for us to, we're getting close to the end of time, but I thought this was worth having a little conversation over. The intersection with philosophy, a way to maybe analyze some fundamental truths and values related to the design of current and future systems, the structures, who they're for, why, who's doing the evaluating, and attending to power. Thoughts?
I love that question, and I am thinking about that too, especially in ways that philosophy and sociology, in my case, intersect. For example, Mitch Clearfield's class about ethics that is taught also at the penitentiary, the design of prisons, the design of what constitutes eligibility to be a student. All of these questions are important. And I mean, one of the things that we're going to do every year, and I wrote this in the chat about the suggestion of more science classes, agreed, is every year sort of assessing which classes ought to be included in that. And this was our way of gathering as much feedback as we could for this first iteration. But every year we're going to be asking colleagues, what about this class? What about that class? How might you see ways that what we're doing intersect? Would you like to learn more to infuse more modules in yours? What can we learn from you? But at every turn, ethics has been part of our conversation. It's already part of every methods class that's included in the area in terms of observe and evaluate. But understanding people as one of the deepening areas, philosophy classes would be outstanding in that regard. So I'm excited about the possibility of those kinds of collaborations as people think about new majors. I know philosophy is also working on a justice, or has a new justice major and other social justice issues. So I'm excited about that. We'll see where it goes. Others have ideas?
Yeah, I was going to say we have a Center of Teaching and Learning here that has courses for other faculty. So we just have a little, lectures or a series of lectures or workshops, so that faculty who want to learn something new about their pedagogy can attend. And that is something that we're planning to use, because we think that people maybe use it, as I found out, people may be doing design in all of their teaching and not know it. And I agree that the sciences, physics, of course, comes immediately to mind, as is chemistry, are using design all the time, but they might not necessarily think of themselves as doing that. So we hope to have these experiences open to faculty from all of our divisions so that they can increasingly see themselves as doing design work that we can then include in our deepening courses.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. If anyone has one final question, feel free to turn on your microphone and ask it.
I have one. We have a society of people that are with little machines in front of them, not communicating in conversation. We're going to have to do an awful big arch between this kind of relationship in the world to what you're explaining.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's what's so important about the physical collaborative nature of the classes, like when we're physically collaborating all the time. So we're not just sitting in class listening to a professor. And we're actually sometimes going to different spaces. We've got different places across campus where we can teach. In the design school, sometimes they take you outside or they take you to a sculpture garden. So there's this idea of putting people in different spaces together so that we can try to keep some of the values that we've had until recently, until the pandemic put us all online in little boxes, and also keep that kind of deep personal learning that we get only with interaction.
I just wanted to add on to what Sharon said, that I taught in fall 2020, I taught human computer interaction, which I taught many times before. Teaching it on Zoom during the pandemic was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Design depends so much on understanding each other as situated corporeal beings and having those kinds of social interactions in the real world. And I'm really excited about being physically together in our human-centered design class this spring.
So Jennifer, the next event we do has to involve, wine and cheese and all these amazing people that are on the screen right now, because it'll be way better, right?
I'm in. Let's make it happen. Thank you to all of you, William, Janet, Justin, Michelle, and Sharon. We are so excited for this program and can't wait to see what's next. Everyone take care and hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Richie.